Have you ever walked into an ancient church or cathedral and felt the weight of history pressing down on you? The worn stone, the hushed whispers of the past, and then, suddenly, you spot it. A face woven entirely from leaves, vines, and foliage, staring back at you as if guarding a secret centuries old. This is the Green Man, one of the most haunting and mysterious symbols to survive the passage of time. Carved into stone, hidden in stained glass, or lurking in the corners of medieval manuscripts, his leafy visage has watched over sacred spaces for hundreds of years. But who is he? A pagan deity, a Christian saint, a symbol of rebirth, or something far darker? The Green Man's presence spans continents and cultures, from the misty forests of Europe to the sacred groves of ancient India. His face appears in places you'd least expect: churches, castles, even modern pubs, yet his true meaning remains shrouded in mystery. Some see him as a guardian of nature, a reminder of the eternal cycle of life and death. Others believe he represents something more primal, a relic of a forgotten faith that refused to fade away. But one thing is certain: wherever he appears, he carries with him an air of the uncanny, as if he knows something we don't. Today, we're going to trace the winding path of this enigmatic figure through history, unraveling the threads of myth, religion, and folklore that have kept him alive in our collective imagination. We'll explore why this leafy face has endured when so many other symbols have been lost to time, and what his persistence tells us about humanity's deepest fears and desires. By the end of this journey, you'll never look at a stone carving or an old church wall the same way again. So let's step into the shadows of the past and uncover the secrets of the Green Man. The earliest whispers of the Green Man emerge from the tangled depths of pre-Christian Europe, where the boundary between man and nature blurred into myth. Long before his face peered from cathedral walls, ancient civilizations carved leafy visages into stone, hinting at a reverence for the wild world that predates recorded history. One of the most striking early examples comes from Roman Gaul, a 2nd century sarcophagus discovered in France, its surface adorned with a face framed by lush oak leaves, as if the dead themselves were returning to the earth's embrace. This wasn't mere decoration. The Romans celebrated gods like Bacchus, often depicted wreathed in vines, and Silvanus, the spirit of untamed forests. Yet the Green Man's true origins may stretch even further back to the Celtic horned god Cernunnos, whose antlers twisted like living branches as he presided over animals and the untamed wilds. Archaeologists have uncovered similar faces peering from the shadows of history. A 4th century mosaic in Libya with a man made of acanthus leaves, or the eerie foliate heads hidden in the ruins of Hindu and Buddhist temples across India. What's fascinating is how these images echo one another across vast distances, as if different cultures tapped into the same primal idea: humanity's deep, tangled kinship with the natural world. In Britain, the Green Man's legacy may have been carved into the very hills. Some scholars suggest the legendary figure of Herne the Hunter, a ghostly stag-headed guardian of Windsor Forest, is another shadow of this ancient archetype. But why did this symbol endure when so many pagan traditions vanished? Perhaps because the Green Man wasn't just a god to be worshipped. He was a story written in bark and leaf, a reminder that life springs eternal from decay. When Christianity spread across Europe, instead of erasing him, stone masons tucked his face into church walls as if the old forest refused to be silenced. Even now, when you stumble upon his gaze in an unexpected corner, it feels like catching a glimpse of something far older than stone, older than faith itself, a whisper from the time when the world was wilder and the trees might still speak. By the time Christianity swept across medieval Europe, something remarkable happened. The Green Man didn't disappear. Instead, he crept into the very heart of the church, his leafy face peering down from cathedral ceilings, carved into choir stalls, and hidden among the stonework of some of the most sacred spaces in Christendom. This wasn't just survival, it was a quiet rebellion of imagery. How did a symbol so deeply rooted in pagan reverence for nature find refuge in the halls of a faith that often sought to suppress the old gods? The answer may lie in the Green Man's remarkable ability to adapt. Some scholars argue the church allowed his presence as a clever act of conversion, repurposing familiar symbols to ease pagans into the new faith. The Green Man, with his cyclical themes of growth and decay, could easily be reinterpreted as a metaphor for resurrection, Christ's triumph over death, mirrored in the annual rebirth of the natural world. Look closely at the 12th century carvings in Southwell Minster in England, where his face bursts forth amid vines like a promise of renewal. Even in the Chartres Cathedral, a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, his visage lingers among biblical figures, as if the architects couldn't bear to erase him entirely. Yet there's another, more intriguing possibility. The Green Man persisted because he spoke to something universal. Medieval Christianity was deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the earth. Saints' feast days aligned with planting and harvest. Churches were built atop ancient sacred springs. The church may have tolerated him not just as a tool for conversion, but because he embodied a truth too powerful to deny. In the shadowy corners of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, his face is carved alongside Christian icons, a silent testament to the enduring human connection to nature. Theories abound about why the clergy turned a blind eye. Some suggest stonemasons, often steeped in folk traditions, smuggled him into designs as a private joke or act of defiance. Others believe he was embraced as a symbol of God's creation, a reminder that divinity could be found in the rustling leaves as much as in Scripture. Whatever the reason, his survival is a testament to the Green Man's power, a pagan whisper in a Christian world, proving that some symbols are too potent to ever fully fade away. If you were to trace the Green Man's footsteps across Europe, you'd find him hiding in plain sight, sometimes grinning, sometimes stern, but always watching. His leafy face appears with surprising consistency from the British Isles to the heart of Germany, yet each region gave him its own distinct flavor. Start in England, where he seems to have taken up permanent residence. Southwell Minster in Nottinghamshire boasts one of the most famous examples, the so-called Peeping Green Man, carved around 1280, his face nestled in a thicket of vines as if caught mid-transformation between man and forest. But he's far from alone. Exeter Cathedral's ceiling is a veritable gallery of foliate heads, some serene, others almost grotesque, their mouths spewing tendrils like living things. York Minster, meanwhile, offers a more playful take, a green man with oak leaves curling from his nostrils, as if nature itself is breathing through him. Cross the Channel into France and the style shifts. The green men of Chartres Cathedral are more subdued, their features softer, as if the stone itself is reluctantly yielding to the vegetation. In Normandy, the Abbé Auxharms in Keene hides a peculiar variant, a green woman, her hair woven from leaves, a rare feminine twist on the motif, but it's in Germany where the carving takes on a wilder edge. The wooden choir stalls of Cologne's churches depict green men with exaggerated, almost monstrous expressions, their foliage twisted into knots and spirals. Some scholars argue these reflect older, more primal Germanic forest spirits, like the green-skinned wilder man of folklore. Why do some regions have more green men than others? The answer might lie in local history. Areas with strong Celtic or pagan ties, like Ireland's Clonfert Cathedral or Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel, show a higher concentration of carvings, as if the old beliefs lingered in the hands of the artisans. Even the materials tell a story. England's durable limestone preserved his face for centuries, while Germany's wood carvings, though fewer, feel more intimate, as if the green man stepped right out of the Black Forest. Whether in stone or oak, solemn or mischievous, his presence across Europe hints at a shared, unspoken language, one where nature and humanity are never truly separate. To understand why the green man's leafy gaze still haunts us, we need to step into the minds of ancient farmers, their hands buried in soil, their survival tied to the relentless turn of the seasons. For them, nature wasn't just a backdrop, it was a living, breathing force as capricious as it was generous. The Green Man embodies this primal relationship, his face a bridge between human life and the wild, untamed world that sustained it. In the rolling fields of Neolithic Europe where the first seeds were sown, people saw divinity in the sprouting grain, the fruit-laden branches, the autumn decay that promised rebirth. This wasn't mere poetry, it was survival logic carved into myth. The cycle was sacred: spring's first shoots, summer's abundance, autumn's sacrifice, winter's dormant silence. Cultures across the globe wove these rhythms into their gods. The Egyptian Osiris, whose death and resurrection mirrored the Nile's floods, the Greek Persephone, descending into the underworld as winter claimed the land. The Green Man fits seamlessly into this pantheon of agricultural deities, but with a haunting difference. Unlike gods bound to temples, his presence is fluid, his face emerging from the very vegetation he represents. A 5th century mosaic in Antioch shows him as the season's crown, his hair a cascade of fruits and grains, a literal harvest given human form. Dig deeper, and the Green Man's ties to fertility rituals come into sharp focus. In Celtic traditions, May Day celebrations featured the Jack in the Green, a dancer shrouded in foliage, leading processions to ensure a bountiful year. Some scholars trace these rites back to prehistoric shamans who wore animal skins and leaves, channeling the spirit of the forest to bless the crops. Even the Green Man's more sinister carvings, faces contorted, leaves spewing like vomit, may reflect the darker side of this bargain. Nature wasn't just a benevolent mother, she could withhold her gifts, bringing famine as easily as feast. The Gothic grotesques in German churches, with their gnashing teeth and wild eyes, might be reminders of this duality, the Green Man as both life-giver and devourer. What's striking is how these ancient fears and hopes echo in modern ecology. The Green Man's resurgence in 20th century environmental movements wasn't accidental. As industrialization severed humanity's ties to the land, his face became a protest, a call to remember what we'd forgotten, that we're not separate from nature but part of its unbroken cycle. When you stand before a medieval carving of the Green Man, you're not just seeing art, you're glimpsing a conversation that began millennia ago, whispered across time by people who knew the earth as both womb and tomb. His leaves aren't mere decoration, they're a language, one that says renewal is never guaranteed, only earned through reverence. Walking through an old church, you might spot two kinds of leafy faces staring back at you, one with vines pouring from his mouth like a living fountain, another simply framed by leaves as if wearing a crown. At first glance, they seem identical, but these carvings tell very different stories. The true Green Man, in the strictest sense, is the disgorging type, his mouth, nostrils, even his eyes erupting with foliage as though the forest is growing from within him. Then there are the foliate heads, serene faces encircled by leaves or flowers, more like guardians of nature than part of it. Scholars have debated for decades whether these are two sides of the same coin or entirely separate traditions, and the answer might lie in the stone itself. Take the 12th century Kilpeck Church in England, where a Green Man spews thick oak branches from his gaping mouth, the wood seeming to writhe as it emerges. Contrast that with the gentle foliate heads of Tewkesbury Abbey, their faces peaceful, leaves framing them like halos. The difference isn't just artistic, it's symbolic. The disgorging Green Man feels alive, almost uncontrollable, as if nature is forcefully reclaiming the human form. Foliate heads, on the other hand, suggest harmony, a balance between humanity and the natural world. Some historians argue this split reflects deeper cultural shifts. Early medieval carvings lean toward the disgorging type, perhaps echoing pagan themes of transformation, while later Gothic examples favor the tamer foliate heads, aligning with Christian ideals of stewardship over wilderness. But not everyone agrees. Dr. Kathleen Basford, who literally wrote the book on the Green Man, insisted both types belong to the same family, different expressions of humanity's bond with nature. Others, like architectural historian Richard Heyman, counter that conflating them erases important nuances. He points to Roman carvings where only the disgorging type appears, suggesting it's the older, more mystical form. Then there's the curious case of the Sheila Nogig, a female figure often found alongside green men, her exaggerated features hinting at another layer of meaning. Could the disgorging green man be part of a broader medieval obsession with mouths as symbols of creation and destruction? The debate gets even thornier when you cross into other cultures. Hindu temple carvings in Khajuraho show deities with foliage emerging from their mouths, eerily similar to European green men, but are they spiritually connected or just a shared artistic instinct? Even within Europe, regional quirks muddy the waters. German wood carvings often blend the two, with faces both surrounded and spewing leaves as if refusing to choose. Perhaps that's the most telling clue of all. The green man has never been a figure of rigid categories, but a shapeshifter, adapting to the fears and hopes of whoever carves him. Whether he's swallowing the forest or wearing it like a crown, his power lies in that ambiguity, a reminder that nature doesn't fit neatly into human labels. The figure of Robin Hood, cloaked in Lincoln green and lurking in Sherwood Forest, might seem worlds apart from the leafy visages of church carvings, but dig deeper, and the threads between these two icons of the greenwood begin to intertwine. The legendary outlaw's connection to the green man isn't just about color or setting. It's rooted in a shared archetype of rebellion, renewal, and the untamed wilds. Start with the obvious. Green, the hue of vitality and concealment, drapes both figures. Robin's garb wasn't merely practical camouflage. It symbolically aligned him with the forest's power, much like the green man's foliage merges human and natural worlds. Then there's the Arthurian echo, the Green Knight of 14th century romance, a towering, otherworldly figure whose emerald skin and challenge to Sir Gawain blur the line between man and myth. Like the Green Man, he's a force of nature incarnate, wielding an axe made of holly and surviving decapitation as if life itself couldn't be severed. Scholars like James Fraser in The Golden Bough have traced these figures back to ancient vegetation rites, where a green spirit, whether knight, outlaw, or leafy-face, embodied the cyclical death and rebirth of the land. Robin Hood's May Day associations with dancing and feasting in the greenwood mirror these older celebrations where the forest wasn't just a backdrop but a living participant in the ritual. But the parallels run darker. Both Robin and the Green Man occupy liminal spaces literally and symbolically. Robin thrives in the forest's margin, defying corrupt authority, while the Green Man lurks at the edges of sacred architecture, a pagan whisper in a Christian world. Even their narratives share a subversive edge. The ballads paint Robin as a trickster, outwitting the sheriff with woodland cunning, just as the Green Man's survival in churches hints at a quiet resistance, his vines creeping into spaces meant to erase him. Some folklorists suggest Robin's merry men, with their animalistic nicknames like Little John or Will Scarlet, echo the Green Man's fusion of human and wild traits, a band of forest spirits masquerading as men. Perhaps most telling is how both figures evolve. Medieval texts gradually Christianize Robin, softening his edges, much like the church sanitized the Green Man into a harmless decorative motif. Yet their primal cores endure. In modern retellings, from Hollywood films to fantasy novels, Robin is still the untamed spirit of the greenwood. Just as the Green Man resurfaces in eco-conscious art, his leaves a protest against concrete and steel. Whether carved in stone or sung in ballads, these green-clad rebels remind us that nature's voice, once raised, is impossible to silence. In the cryptic manuscripts of medieval alchemists, where dragons devour their tails and suns marry moons, the green man slips into the margins not as decoration, but as a key to the universe's deepest secrets. To those initiates hunting the philosopher's stone, his leafy visage wasn't merely a relic of pagan past. It symbolized viriditas, the sacred greening force believed to pulse through all living things. The 12th century mystic Hildegard of Bingen wrote of this emerald energy as divine vitality, the spark that turned base matter into gold and flesh into spirit. Alchemists saw the same power in the green man, his foliage not just ornament but alchemy in motion, nature's relentless drive to transform decay into new life. Leaf through an illuminated alchemical text like the Splendor Solis, and you'll find figures with skin of jade, their bodies entwined with vines, standing ankle-deep in primordial waters. These aren't mere green men, they're personifications of the prima materia, the chaotic first matter from which all creation springs. In the Rosarium Philosophorum, a green-faced king dissolves into a bubbling flask, his death and rebirth mirroring the alchemical process of solve et coagula dissolution and rebirth. Here, the green man becomes more than myth. He's a living formula, his cyclical growth echoing the alchemist's quest to purify and perfect the soul. What's startling are the parallels between these esoteric images and older traditions. The alchemical green lion, a beast depicted devouring the sun, shares uncanny traits with the disgorging green men of churches. Both figures consume and regenerate, turning destruction into fertility. Even the color holds meaning. In alchemy, green marked the midpoint of transformation, when base metals began their ascent toward gold, just as the green man stands between worlds, human yet inhuman, mortal yet eternal. But why would alchemists obsessed with minerals and stars fixate on a leafy face? Because their work wasn't just about lead and gold. It was a mirror of the cosmos, where every laboratory process mirrored nature's cycles. The green man's vines were the filamentum, the connective threads binding heaven and earth. When an alchemist studied his own reflection in a flask, perhaps he glimpsed the green man staring back, a reminder that true transmutation began not in the crucible, but in the soul's greening, where spirit and matter tangled as tightly as oak roots in stone. Travel eastward from Europe's cathedrals, and you'll find the green man's cousins hiding in the intricate stonework of Islamic mosques and palaces, faces erupting with vines, their tendrils curling into geometric perfection. The resemblance is uncanny, yet these foliate heads adorn spaces as sacred as the Alhambra's courtyards and the mosques of Isfahan, worlds apart from Christian Europe. How did this motif cross such vast cultural divides? The answer may lie in the Silk Road's whispering trade routes, where artisans swapped more than just spices and textiles. Take the 14th century Alhambra in Granada, where stucco walls bloom with faces framed by acanthus leaves, their foliage so precise it seems to breathe. Unlike Europe's green men, these figures lack the wild, disgorging energy instead. Their leaves obey the strict symmetry of Islamic art, woven into arabesques that symbolize infinity. Yet the message feels familiar, nature and divinity intertwined. Even more striking are the Mughal gardens of India, where fountains shaped like leafy faces once spilled water into lotus pools. The Taj Mahal's Payatra Dora inlay hides subtle foliate heads among its floral patterns, as if the artisans couldn't resist tucking the old symbol into paradise itself. Scholars are divided on whether this reflects direct influence or a shared human instinct to see faces in nature. Some point to the Sasanian Empire, where pre-Islamic Persia carved vine-clad figures resembling Roman green men, evidence of ancient cross-pollination. Others argue Islamic artists independently developed the motif, channeling the Quran's reverence for gardens as reflections of divine order. The 9th century Samarra mosaics in Iraq show foliage spewing heads eerily similar to Kilpek Church's carvings despite no known contact. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the word itself. Al-Qidr, Islam's enigmatic green-clad sage who guides the lost with nature's wisdom. Like the Green Man, he's a shapeshifter associated with immortality, renewal, and the color of life. Whether through trade, tradition, or sheer synchronicity, the Green Man's legacy proves that some symbols transcend borders, whispering the same truth in every tongue. Humanity's oldest stories are written in leaves. Freemasonry's grand lodges hold secrets in plain sight, encoded in symbols, whispered in rituals, and carved into the very architecture where initiates gather. Among these cryptic emblems, the Green Man peers from cornices and stained glass, his leafy guise hinting at deeper truths reserved for those who know how to look. To the uninitiated, he might seem just another decorative flourish, but to Masons, he's a silent teacher. His presence in lodges from London to Philadelphia isn't accidental. It's a deliberate nod to esoteric traditions where nature and wisdom intertwine. The connection becomes clearer when you trace the threads of Masonic symbolism. Consider the acacia motif, a sprig of evergreen representing immortality, often paired with the Green Man's visage. Both symbols echo the same idea. Knowledge, like nature, cycles through phases of concealment and revelation. In some lodges, the Green Man is explicitly linked to the Green Man of Knowledge, a figure from occult lore said to guard ancient wisdom. Manuscripts like the 18th century Franken transcript describe rituals where candidates confront a foliate-faced guardian, testing their readiness to receive hidden truths. Why would Freemasons, an order steeped in geometry and rationality, embrace such an earthy symbol? The answer lies in their fascination with architecture as metaphor. Just as medieval stonemasons carved the Green Man into cathedrals, speculative Masons saw him as a blueprint for spiritual growth, a reminder that wisdom, like foliage, must grow organically. Some researchers point to the Rosicrucian manifestos, early 17th century texts that blended alchemy and mysticism, where the Green Lion, a sibling to the Green Man, symbolized the raw material of enlightenment. Yet the Green Man's Masonic role isn't monolithic. In Scottish Rite lodges, he's often associated with the Wild Man of the Woods, a primal figure testing initiates resilience. French Masonic traditions, meanwhile, align him with the Chevalier de la Branche Verte, a knightly order celebrating nature's regenerative power. Even the apron designs of Master Masons sometimes feature leafy borders, subtly echoing the Green Man's union of craft and creation. The most intriguing theory comes from fringe Masonic scholars, who suggest the Green Man's recurrence in lodges built atop Templar sites like Rosslyn Chapel hints at a survival of older, suppressed knowledge. Whether fact or folklore, his persistence in these spaces underscores a universal truth. Symbols that endure do so because they speak to something timeless. For Freemasons, the Green Man isn't just a relic, he's a living cipher, his leaves forever rustling with the promise that nature's deepest secrets are written in a language older than words. In the smoky haze of the 1960s counterculture, where protests against war and industrial pollution mingled with a yearning for forgotten spirituality, the Green Man staged a quiet but defiant comeback. No longer confined to church carvings or medieval manuscripts, he re-emerged as a rallying point for a generation disillusioned with concrete and smokestacks. Neo-pagan movements, from Druidry to Wicca, embraced his leafy visage as the embodiment of what they felt modernity had lost, the sacredness of the living earth. Suddenly, his face adorned pendants, ritual robes, and protest banners, a symbol of rebellion against ecological destruction and spiritual emptiness. Druidry, with its deep roots in Celtic reverence for oak groves and sacred springs, was among the first to reclaim him. Groups like the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids wove the Green Man into their ceremonies, seeing him as a modern face of Cernunnos, the antlered god of the wild. At summer solstice gatherings in Britain's ancient stone circles, celebrants crowned effigies with ivy and hawthorn, chanting invocations that might have sounded familiar to a medieval peasant. But this wasn't mere historical reenactment. 20th century Druids recast the Green Man as an ecological prophet, his vines a warning against deforestation and climate change. Scholar Philip Cargom, a prominent voice in contemporary Druidry, described him as the spirit of the forests we're desperately trying to save, a reminder that nature isn't just resources but kin. Meanwhile, Wicca, a younger but rapidly growing tradition, incorporated the Green Man into its Wheel of the Year festivities. For Wiccans, he became the horned god's leafy twin, ruling the waxing half of the year alongside the goddess. At Beltane rituals, where dancers leaped over fires to ensure fertility, the Green Man's image was invoked in wreaths and masks, blending seamlessly into a theology that celebrated nature's cycles as divine. Starhawk, the influential eco-feminist witch, wrote of him as the god who dies and rises in the corn, the green force that pulses through every leaf and blade of grass. Here, the Green Man wasn't just a symbol, he was an active participant in ritual magic, a conduit for healing a planet in crisis. Beyond formal traditions, the Green Man flourished in broader eco-spiritual movements. Earth Day rallies in the 1970s featured his face on posters next to slogans like "Respect Your Mother." Artists like Marion Green and John Matthews created tarot decks and meditation guides, framing him as a guide for personal and planetary transformation. Even children's books like The Green Man by Gail E. Haley reintroduced him to new generations as a guardian of vanishing wilderness. Environmental activists adopted his imagery with purpose. Logging protesters in the Pacific Northwest wore Green Man masks while chaining themselves to ancient redwoods, merging ecological defiance with mythic resonance. What's striking is how effortlessly the Green Man transitioned from medieval churches to modern megaphones. Unlike reconstructed deities whose meanings were debated, his symbolism was intuitively grasped. Environmentalist and author William Anderson observed, he didn't need explaining. People saw his face and immediately understood this was the spirit of the trees they'd climbed as kids, the voice of the rivers they'd fought to clean. His resurgence wasn't just nostalgia, it was a recognition that some symbols transcend time, speaking directly to the crises of the present. When you spot a Green Man tattoo on a barrister's arm or his likeness in a community garden mural, you're witnessing more than a trend. You're seeing an ancient archetype flex its leaves, still whispering the same urgent message. The wild world isn't just around us, it's within us. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who mapped the hidden landscapes of the human psyche, might have recognized the Green Man instantly, not as a relic of the past, but as a living archetype rising from the deepest layers of the collective unconscious. Jung believed certain symbols appear across cultures not by coincidence, but because they tap into universal patterns of human experience. The Green Man fits seamlessly into this framework as an embodiment of what Jung called the forest archetype, a primal symbol of nature's untamed creativity, tangled with our own inner wilderness. To stand before his carved visage is to confront something older than religion or art, a mirror of the mind's fertile darkness where ideas sprout like vines in shadow. Jung often described the unconscious as a forest dense, mysterious, and teeming with life unseen. Just as sunlight barely penetrates a canopy, our conscious awareness only grazes the surface of what grows below. The Green Man, with his face half hidden by leaves, becomes a perfect metaphor for this hidden fertility. His disgorging vines resemble the way creativity erupts into consciousness, often chaotically, as if the unconscious is speaking through us rather than being controlled by us. Think of artists who describe their work as channeling something beyond themselves, or writers who wake with entire sentences coiled in their minds like tendrils pushing through stone. The Green Man's foliage doesn't just decorate, it invades, reflecting how the unconscious disrupts orderly thought with bursts of inspiration, dream imagery, or even repressed trauma breaking through. This archetypal reading explains why the Green Man appears in cultures with no apparent historical connection. Jung argued that archetypes emerge independently because they answer fundamental human questions like our relationship to nature's cycles of death and rebirth. A 12th century stonemason in France and a Hindu temple sculptor in India might never have met, but both would have known the visceral fear of famine, the joy of harvest, and the awe of watching a barren field explode with life after rain. The Green Man gave form to those universal experiences, becoming a shared psychological shorthand for nature's and the psyche's relentless generative power. Yet the archetype has a darker edge. Jung warned that ignoring the unconscious could lead to its contents erupting in destructive ways, much like a neglected forest might reclaim a village with strangling roots. The Green Man's more grotesque carvings, faces contorted, leaves spewing like vomit, might symbolize this shadow side, nature's fury or the psyche's repressed energies turning monstrous. Modern psychology sees parallels in eco-anxiety, where suppressed guilt over environmental harm manifests as nightmares of drowning in vines or being pursued by leafy figures. Even the term green guilt unconsciously echoes the archetype, suggesting the Green Man isn't just a historical curiosity but a living presence in our mental landscapes. What makes this symbol endure isn't just its antiquity but its adaptability. In Jungian terms, the Green Man evolves because the collective unconscious is always in dialogue with the times. When medieval Christians softened his imagery into foliate heads, they were unconsciously taming the archetype to fit their worldview. When 20th century environmentalists revived his wilder form, they were reclaiming him as a voice for the planet's neglected soul. Today, he appears in therapy offices as a symbol of personal growth, a reminder that healing, like spring, requires both patience and the courage to let old selves decay so new ones can emerge. Whether carved into cathedral stone or sketched in a dream journal, the Green Man remains what he's always been, a bridge between the human mind and the ancient whispering green. In medieval poetry, the Green Man steps from stone into verse, his leafy presence twisting through rhymes like ivy through castle walls. One of the most striking early appearances comes in the 14th century epic Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, where the emerald-skinned challenger bursts into King Arthur's court, his axe and holly bob symbolizing nature's untamed power. This isn't just a knight with green armor, he's a force of the wild itself, surviving decapitation as effortlessly as a tree regrows branches. The poem's lush descriptions of the changing seasons mirror the Green Knight's cyclical nature, tying him to agricultural rites where the king of summer must fall to winter only to rise again. Scholars like J.R.R. Tolkien, who translated the work, saw in him a bridge between pagan myths of vegetative deities and Christian allegory, his challenge to Gawain testing human pride against nature's eternal laws. Shakespeare, too, wove the Green Man's spirit into his plays, though never naming him directly. In As You Like It, the Forest of Arden becomes a living character, its leafy shadows transforming exiles like Rosalind and Orlando. Duke Senior praises Arden's tongues in trees, sermons in stones, echoing the Green Man's silent wisdom. Even more explicit is The Winter's Tale, where the statue of Hermione comes to life, amidst a chorus of flowers and greenery, blurring the line between art and nature's resurrection. These themes aren't accidental. Elizabethan England was steeped in folk traditions like the May Day, Green George rituals, where villagers draped a man in foliage to parade through town. Shakespeare's audiences would have recognized the symbolism instantly, the wild man as both disruptor and healer, a reminder that civilization is just a clearing in nature's endless forest. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the Green Man takes on new shades in romantic literature. John Keats's poem La Belle Dame sans Merci features a knight ensnared by a fairy woman in a grove, his pallor lily white against her verdant enchantment, a dark inversion of the life-giving Green Man. William Morris, the arts and crafts movement pioneer, resurrected him in the wood beyond the world, where a golden-clad wood wife rules over a sentient forest, her authority drawn from the same archetype. Morris's designs for wallpaper and tapestries often included foliate heads, merging art and activism as industrialization smothered England's countryside. Modern fantasy literature has embraced the Green Man with open arms, none more playfully than Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. In Lords and Ladies, the Green Man is literalized as a club-wielding, chlorophyll-filled guardian of the old woods, battling encroaching human folly. Pratchett's satire bites deep. His Green Man isn't a noble savage but a cranky, pragmatic force, exasperated by humanity's short memory. Similarly, Neil Gaiman's The Sandman comics feature a leafy, dreamlike figure named Element Girl, whose fate intertwines with nature's sorrow. These modern iterations often carry an eco-conscious edge, as in Ursula K. Le Guin's The Word for World is Forest, where the Green Man's ethos is weaponized by indigenous aliens against colonizers. Even children's literature whispers his name. The Green Man by Gail E. Haley turns him into a gentle giant who teaches a village to respect nature, while Over the Garden Wall, a beloved animated series, echoes medieval motifs with its beast, a shadowy figure crowned with antlers and roots. The Green Man's literary journey proves his adaptability. Whether as a moral lesson in a medieval allegory or a tragic eco-warrior in contemporary sci-fi, his roots dig deep into storytelling's fertile soil. Every retelling adds another leaf to his crown, ensuring his story, like the forests he represents, never truly ends. In the heart of England's May Day celebrations, where villages erupt with Morris dancers and flower crowns, one figure stands out. Jack in the Green, a towering spectre of foliage, his body swallowed by a cage of fresh leaves and branches. This isn't just a whimsical costume, it's a living relic of the Green Man's enduring grip on the human imagination. The tradition, dating back to the 18th century but rooted in far older rites, sees a dancer shrouded in a wooden framework draped with ivy and hawthorn, parading through streets as if the forest itself decided to join the revelry. The climax comes when Jack is ritually slain, his foliage stripped away by the crowd, a symbolic death that mirrors ancient sacrifices to ensure the land's fertility. Historians like Ronald Hutton trace this back to pre-Christian spring festivals where effigies of nature spirits were torn apart to scatter their life force over fields. Venture into Germany's Pfingstbaum traditions and you'll find eerie echoes. In some villages, a young man clad in birch branches becomes the Mekönig, or May King, leading processions that culminate in the ceremonial felling of a tree. The parallels are uncanny. Like Jack in the Green, the Mekönig embodies the spirit of vegetation, his temporary reign reflecting nature's cyclical bounty. Even the pyres of Europe's Beltane fires, where people leaped over flames to purify and renew, carry whispers of the Green Man's legacy. The smoke curling into the night sky might as well be his breath, carrying prayers for fertile soil and healthy livestock. But it's in the Basque Country San Juan festivals that the Green Man's darker side resurfaces. Here, the Jangalak wild men covered in moss and ferns emerge from the woods at midsummer, their dances growing increasingly frenzied until they collapse, spent, as if channeling the earth's exhaustion after the solstice's peak. Anthropologists argue these performances preserve Neolithic shamanic rituals, where wearing greenery wasn't just disguise but transformation, a way to become the forest's voice. The Jangalak's final collapse mirrors the Green Man's disgorging carvings, a surrender to nature's overwhelming power. What's striking is how these traditions adapt without losing their core. In Padstow, Cornwall, the Abbey Os Festival features a hobbyhorse draped in blackened greenery, its serpentine dance threading through crowds like a root seeking water. Though the symbolism has blurred over time, the Os's flickering tongue and snapping jaws recall the Green Man's more chaotic aspects, nature as both giver and taker. Meanwhile, Sweden's midsummer celebrations, with their flower pole rituals, distill the same essence into quieter symbolism. A communal raising of the majstang, a phallic pole wrapped in leaves, becomes a collective prayer for growth. The survival of these customs isn't nostalgia, it's necessity. When drought or blight threatened pre-industrial communities, dancing the green man back to life wasn't folklore, it was survival strategy. Today, as climate change looms, his festivals have taken on new urgency. Modern eco-pagans in events like the UK's Wild Hunt gathering revived Jack in the Green not as theatre, but as protest, weaving environmental activism into every leaf-strewn procession. The green man's face, whether carved in stone or woven from fresh-cut branches, remains a mirror. He reflects our oldest fear, that nature's patience isn't infinite, and our oldest hope, that if we honor the green world's rhythm, it might just honor us in return. Step into any medieval church adorned with green men, and you'll notice something curious. They're rarely random decorations. Instead, they cluster around doorways, baptismal fonts, or even rain spouts, as if placed with intention. This precise positioning has sparked fierce debate among historians. Were these carvings simply architectural whimsy, or did they serve a hidden, ritualistic purpose? The answer might lie in the stones themselves. Take the 12th century Kilpeck Church in Herefordshire, where a green man disgorges vines directly above the south door. To some scholars, this placement is no accident. Doors symbolize thresholds between worlds sacred and profane, life and death, making them the perfect stage for a figure embodying nature's cyclical power. Dr. Mercia MacDermott, a leading researcher in folkloric symbolism, argues that these carvings functioned as spiritual sentinels, their foliage warding off malign forces trying to enter sacred space. Yet not everyone agrees. Architectural historian Richard Heyman counters that green men often appear alongside grotesques like gargoyles or mermaids, elements widely accepted as decorative. At Lincoln Cathedral, foliate heads mingle with playful carvings of musicians and acrobats, suggesting they might have been medieval stonemasons inside jokes or demonstrations of skill. The sheer variety of styles supports this. Some green men smirk mischievously, while others grimace in agony, their expressions as diverse as the artisans who carved them. Could these faces simply reflect the whims of individual craftsmen, freed by patrons to indulge their creativity? But then there's the water connection. In France's Vézelay Abbey, a green man spews leaves from a capital directly above a former holy well. Similar carvings peer down from corbels near baptismal fonts in Canterbury Cathedral and Durham's cloisters. Water, in medieval cosmology, symbolized purification and rebirth, themes mirroring the green man's symbolism. Dr. Sarah J. Biggs, an expert on medieval liturgical spaces, notes that wells and fonts were often built atop pre-Christian sacred springs, making green men potential bridges between old and new beliefs. Their placement might have been a quiet nod to local congregations still steeped in nature reverence. The debate grows thornier when you consider regional patterns. In Devon and Cornwall, green men frequently adorn rood screens, barriers separating nave from chancel, where parishioners would have seen them during Mass. Were they meant to focus the faithful's minds on creation's wonders, as theologian Matthew Fox suggests? Or could they, as archaeologist Miranda Aldhouse Green proposes, be remnants of folk theology, where ordinary people infused official doctrine with older, earthier spirituality? A clue might lie in Ireland's Clonfert Cathedral, where a green man's mouth forms a spout channeling rainwater away from the building. Here, practical function blurs with symbolism. The carving literally breathes life into the church, its water-carrying vines echoing baptismal renewal. Perhaps the truth lies in the middle. The green men gazing down from Chartres Cathedral's labyrinthine stonework aren't just decorations or ritual objects, they're both. Like stained glass windows that beautify while teaching biblical stories, these carvings likely served multiple purposes, pleasing the eye, protecting the faithful, and preserving a whisper of the wild world beyond the church walls. What's undeniable is their deliberate placement, whether guarding thresholds, marking water, or simply reminding worshippers of nature's divinity. Their leaves still rustle with meanings we're only beginning to decipher. For centuries, the Green Man has been portrayed as an overwhelmingly male figure, his bearded face wreathed in leaves, his presence dominating church carvings and folklore. But hidden in the shadows of history, a far rarer counterpart emerges. The Green Woman, her feminine features framed by blossoming vines, her existence hinting at a more complex story behind this ancient symbol. One of the most striking examples survives in the Norman Abbey Auxhams in Keene, where a serene stone face peers from the archways, her long hair transformed into cascading foliage. Unlike the wild, disgorging green men of nearby churches, her leaves seem to grow harmoniously from her skin, as though she embodies nature's nurturing side rather than its untamed force. This isn't an isolated case. Across Europe, scattered carvings whisper of a forgotten feminine counterpart, like the 14th century Green Woman in Bristol's St. Mary Redcliffe Church, her lips parted as if singing leaves into existence, or the mysterious foliate heads in Swiss monasteries that blurred gender entirely, their features softly androgynous. Why are these figures so rare compared to their male counterparts? Historian Dr. Miranda Aldhouse Green suggests a deliberate suppression, noting that medieval Christianity often absorbed pagan male deities more easily than goddesses. When the church adopted the Green Man, he was sanitized into decoration, she argues, but a green woman, too close to the old Earth Mothers, too dangerous to the new order. The evidence stretches beyond stone. In pre-Christian Europe, goddesses like the Celtic Nantasulta or Roman Flora were depicted with verdant attributes, their cloaks woven from living plants. The Viking saga of Freya and Gertha even describes a mythical leaf maiden guarding sacred groves. Some scholars, like Marija Gimbutas, link these figures to Neolithic Earth Mother cults, where female divinities symbolized agricultural fertility. The famous Sheila Nogig carvings, explicitly feminine figures often found alongside green men, might represent a distorted survival of this tradition, their exaggerated features a coded protest against religious erasure. Yet the Green Woman's legacy isn't purely historical. Modern paganism has reclaimed her with vigor. Wiccan rituals often invoke a green goddess alongside the horned god, celebrating her as the embodiment of cyclical growth. Artist Dorothy Sterling's stained glass interpretations show her as a fusion of Artemis and Persephone, crowned with ripened wheat and poppies. Even eco-feminist movements frame her revival as symbolic resistance, a challenge to both environmental exploitation and patriarchal narratives that equate nature with passive femininity. The Green Woman isn't just a missing piece of the puzzle, says activist Starhawk. She's a reminder that the Earth's power was never meant to be gendered or tamed. Perhaps the most intriguing twist comes from contemporary archaeology. Recent digs at Catalhoyuk, a 9,000-year-old Neolithic site in Turkey, uncovered shrines adorned with plant-covered female figures proto-green women venerated millennia before Christianity. Similar finds in Malta and Crete suggest these symbols crossed continents long before cathedrals rose. The Green Man, it seems, may have had a mother, or perhaps all along he was never just a man at all. His leaves keep growing, and with each new discovery they whisper an older, wilder truth. Nature's face was always more diverse than stone alone could show. The Green Man is far from alone in the world's pantheon of nature. Spirits, his leafy face echoes across continents, appearing in forms as diverse as the cultures that revered them. In Japan's Shinto tradition, the wrinkled, staff-carrying Jorogen emerges from ancient folklore as a god of longevity, often depicted beneath a sacred peach tree with a deer at his side. His white beard and benevolent smile mirror the Green Man's wise elder archetype, but where the European figure bursts with untamed vitality, Jorogen embodies harmony, his connection to the natural world expressed through quiet symbiosis rather than wild entanglement. The parallel runs deeper. Both figures surface near sacred water sources, with Georgian shrines often built beside healing springs, much like the green men carved above medieval baptismal fonts. Journey to India, and another verdant deity takes center stage, Krishna, frequently hailed as the Green One in texts like the Bhagavata Purana. His emerald skin symbolizes not just life's abundance but its playful, even mischievous energy, stealing butter as a child, dancing with milkmaids in moonlit groves. Unlike the solitary green man, Krishna's greenery is relational, woven into stories of community and devotion. Yet hidden in Hindu temple carvings, especially at Khajuraho, a different leafy face peers from the stone, vine-choked figures spewing foliage from their mouths, nearly identical to Europe's disgorging green men. Could this be cultural convergence or evidence of ideas traveling the Silk Road? Now cross the Atlantic to Mesoamerica, where the Maya worshipped Yum Cox, the youthful maize god, his headdress a living stalk of corn. His myth cycle, death at harvest, rebirth with the rains, mirrors the green man's cyclical themes, but with a crucial difference. Where European carvings emphasize the wild forest, Yum Cox represents cultivated abundance, humanity's partnership with nature rather than submission to it. Aztec art takes this further, depicting Tlaloc, the storm god, with goggle-eyed visages sprouting vegetation, his tears nourishing the earth as rain. Here, the green deity isn't just a symbol but an active participant in survival, his moods dictating feast or famine. Africa's traditions introduce another layer. The Men people of Sierra Leone speak of Jibanga, a forest spirit who appears as a man cloaked in leaves, teaching hunters the secrets of the wild. Like the Green Man, he's a liminal figure, both protector and trickster, but his stories emphasize reciprocity. Gifts must be left for Jibanga or he'll lead travelers astray. Meanwhile, the Congo's Ekiko, a nature spirit carved with foliage emerging from his body, was believed to wither or flourish alongside the health of the land, a direct ecological metaphor centuries before modern environmentalism. What unites these disparate figures isn't just their greenery but the shared human instinct to personify nature's forces. From Japan's peach groves to Celtic oak forests, people saw faces in the foliage because the natural world spoke to them, not in words but in seasons, harvests, storms. Psychologists call this pareidolia, the tendency to find patterns in randomness, but that clinical term misses the deeper truth. These faces gave voice to the voiceless, making the incomprehensible cycles of growth and decay feel intimate, even negotiable. When a medieval peasant prayed to a green man carving or a mend hunter left an offering for Jibanga, they were engaging in the same act, bridging the gap between human fragility and nature's vast, indifferent power. The differences, though, are equally revealing. Europe's green man often feels like a relic, a fading whisper of paganism in Christian spaces, while Krishna's verdant playfulness pulses with ongoing devotion. Yum Cox's agricultural focus contrasts sharply with the green man's wildness, reflecting how Mesoamerican civilizations centered their survival on maize rather than untamed woods. And where Jibanga demands respect through consequence, Japan's Jurajin offers longevity as reward. Each culture's green deity holds up a mirror to its relationship with the environment, whether as adversary, partner, or parent. Perhaps that's why these figures still resonate today. In a world grappling with climate crisis, the Green Man and his global kin remind us that personifying nature isn't primitive superstition, it's a profound recognition that the earth was never truly silent. Its voice just takes different forms, from a church's stone vines to a Hindu god's emerald laugh. Among the lions, eagles, and fleurs-de-lis of medieval heraldry, one unexpected figure peers through the foliage, the Green Man, his leafy face adorning shields and banners in defiance of the strict conventions of noble symbolism. While heraldry typically favored beasts and geometric patterns, certain families chose this enigmatic motif, embedding nature's wildness into their very identity. The Basings of Hampshire stand out with their striking crest, a green man's visage wreathed in oak leaves, his gaze steady beneath a knight's helmet. This wasn't mere decoration. For a noble house to claim such an emblem, they were making a deliberate statement, tying their lineage to themes of renewal, resilience, and perhaps even arcane knowledge lost to time. The choice becomes even more intriguing when you consider the historical context. Heraldry served as a visual language communicating power, ancestry, and allegiance. A lion denoted courage, a tower symbolized steadfastness, but what did the Green Man proclaim? Some historians argue that families like the Basings, whose lands bordered ancient forests, adopted him as a guardian of their wooded domain. Others suggest ties to alchemical traditions where the Green Man represented viriditas, the life force nobles sought to harness for prosperity. The Foljambe family of Derbyshire went further, pairing their Green Man with a silver crescent moon, a nod perhaps to the cyclical nature he embodied, or even esoteric lunar wisdom guarded by the aristocracy. Not all heraldic green men were created equal. Compare the Basing's dignified oak-clad face to the wilder rendition on the crest of the German von Gruningen lineage, where the figure's mouth spews vines like a living thicket. This variation hints at cultural divides. English heraldry often tamed the motif into respectability, while Germanic coats of arms embraced its untamed roots. Even rarer are examples like the Italian Della Rover family, whose name means "of the oak tree," and whose crest featured a green man intertwined with their papal connections, suggesting nature's sanctity could transcend peasant superstition and enter the highest echelons of power. Why would nobles so invested in projecting control align themselves with a symbol of nature's chaos? The answer may lie in the Green Man's adaptability. For some, he signified stewardship, a noble's duty to protect his lands as the Green Man guarded the forest. For others, like the secretive Order of the Crescent in medieval France, he represented hidden knowledge, his face a cipher for initiation rites. And then there's the practical angle. Families with ties to forestry or viticulture might have adopted him as a patron of their livelihoods, much like guilds used tools in their emblems. The most tantalizing cases blur the line between heraldry and mystery. Take the cryptic green man carved into the tomb of Sir William de Langeton in Chester Cathedral, his stone face framed by pomegranates, a fruit symbolizing resurrection. Was this a private code, a knight's nod to beliefs too unorthodox to state plainly? Or consider the shattered crest of the Polish Lubomirski family, where only fragments of a foliate head remain, leaving historians to wonder if it was deliberately defaced during religious purges. Each of these emblems whispers of a time when symbols held power beyond decoration, and the Green Man's presence in heraldry wasn't just art. It was a language spoken in leaves and stone, waiting to be deciphered. When Protestant reformers swept through Europe in the 16th century, armed with chisels and righteous fury, they viewed religious art as idolatry, a dangerous distraction from pure scripture. Statues of saints were toppled, frescoes whitewashed, and stained glass windows shattered into irreparable shards. Yet amid this deliberate destruction, something remarkable happened. The Green Man, a symbol rooted in pre-Christian nature worship, survived. In churches from England to Germany, his leafy face continued to peer from vaulted ceilings and choir stalls, untouched by the iconoclast's hammers. Why did this enigmatic figure, so clearly tied to older pagan traditions, evade the purges that erased so many others? The answer lies in the Green Man's chameleon-like ability to blend into his surroundings, becoming whatever each era needed him to be. To the Protestant reformers, outright destruction wasn't always practical, especially when local congregations resisted. Instead, many carvings were reinterpreted rather than removed. The Green Man, already centuries old by the Reformation, had long been absorbed into Christian symbolism. In parish churches where he adorned roof bosses or pew ends, he could be dismissed as mere decoration, a stylized floral motif rather than an object of veneration. At St. Mary's in Beverley, England, reformers spared a particularly intricate green man carving by arguing it represented nothing more than God's bounty in creation, a neutral celebration of nature's beauty rather than a pagan holdover. This linguistic sleight of hand allowed many foliate heads to survive, while more overtly, idolatrous imagery like statues of the Virgin Mary were reduced to rubble. Yet survival wasn't just about clever excuses. The green man's very ambiguity worked in his favor. Unlike saints or biblical scenes, his meaning was fluid. Puritans might see him as a warning against earthly excess, his foliage embodying the transience of mortal life. More mystically inclined reformers could interpret him as a symbol of spiritual rebirth, his leaves echoing biblical metaphors like "the leaf shall not wither" from Psalms. Even in Calvinist strongholds like Geneva, where iconoclasm was most severe, a handful of green men lingered not because they were overlooked, but because their symbolic vagueness made them hard to classify as threats. There's another, darker possibility. Some reformers may have deliberately preserved the green man as a cautionary tale. In a few Lutheran churches, disgorging foliate heads were left intact near pulpits, their grotesque features serving as visual sermons against unchristian excess. A carving in Wittenberg's Stadtkirche, just blocks from where Martin Luther preached, shows a green man with vines bursting from his eyes and mouth, a vivid warning against sinful indulgence. Here, the same symbol once celebrated as a life-giver was repurposed as a moral scarecrow, his wildness now representing chaos to be tamed by faith. The Reformation wasn't the first time the green man adapted to survive, and it wouldn't be the last. His resilience lies in this very mutability, a face that can be pagan or Christian, decorative or didactic, sacred or profane depending on who's looking. While more explicit symbols fell to doctrinal purges, the green man endured by being just ambiguous enough to escape notice, yet just familiar enough to avoid suspicion. In the end, his greatest power wasn't rooted in any single meaning, but in the ability to keep whispering different truths to different people, his leaves always growing anew. As the smoke of the Industrial Revolution thickened over Europe's skies, the green man seemed to vanish into the soot, his leafy face crumbling from neglected church walls, his symbolism drowned out by the clatter of steam engines. The 18th and 19th centuries were no friend to nature's old emblems. Factories replaced forests, and the rhythmic churn of machines severed humanity's visceral ties to the land. Churches, once his sanctuary, fell into disrepair or were stripped of superstitious carvings by reformers who saw beauty as frivolity. For a time, it appeared the green man might become just another ghost of the pre-industrial past, his whispers lost beneath the triumphant roar of progress. But then came the Victorians, those paradoxical champions of both empire and nostalgia. As industrialization's grip tightened, a counter-current emerged, a yearning for the simpler medieval world. Antiquarians like John Ruskin pored over crumbling cathedrals, their sketchbooks filling with sketches of forgotten grotesques and foliate heads. In their eyes, these carvings weren't pagan relics but proof of a purer, more artistic age. Ruskin's The Stones of Venice, published in 1851, became a manifesto for this revival, framing Gothic architecture as a moral antidote to industrial alienation. Suddenly, the green man wasn't just surviving, he was being studied, his every leaf catalogued with scholarly fervor. The arts and crafts movement, led by firebrands like William Morris, took this obsession further. Morris, who famously declared, "Have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful," saw the green man as a symbol of everything industrialization had trampled: craftsmanship, connection to nature, and the dignity of handmade art. His designs for wallpapers, tapestries, and stained glass teemed with foliate faces, their tendrils curling through peacock feathers and pomegranates. At his workshops in Merton Abbey, artisans carved new green men into furniture and tiles, not as mere decoration but as protest, a leafy middle finger to mass production. Yet this revival wasn't purely romantic. The Victorians had a habit of remaking history in their own image. When architect George Gilbert Scott restored churches, he often improved upon the originals, adding green men where none existed or smoothing their wild features into something more palatable. The infamous restoration of Tewkesbury Abbey saw foliate heads given suspiciously symmetrical foliage, their once wild, disgorging vines tamed into orderly patterns. Even the terminology shifted. What medieval masons might have called the wild man of the woods became the sanitized green man, a label coined by Lady Raglan in 1939, centuries after the carvings were made. The movement's pinnacle came with the pre-Raphaelites, who wove the green man into their lush, mythic paintings. Edward Burne-Jones' stained glass at Birmingham's St. Philip's Cathedral features a golden-haired foliate head surrounded by medieval-style flora, while Dante Gabriel Rossetti's sketches show knights encountering leafy figures in enchanted glades. Here, the green man became less a religious symbol than an aesthetic one, a shorthand for the authentic medieval spirit the industrial age had supposedly crushed. What's fascinating is how this revival mirrored broader cultural anxieties. Just as today's audiences romanticize the 1980s or 90s as simpler times, the Victorians projected their fears onto the past. The green man, once a potent symbol of nature's cycles, became a canvas for their own nostalgia, a way to critique factories and pollution without rejecting progress entirely. Even Charles Dickens, that chronicler of industrial London, tucked a green man into the illustrations for the Old Curiosity Shop, a quiet nod to the vanishing green world beyond the city's soot-stained streets. By the century's end, the green man had infiltrated unexpected places. He appeared in pub signs across England, his face promising good harvests and hearty ale. Tourists could buy mass-produced clay pipes molded with his likeness, ironically made possible by the very factories his revival criticized. And in the grand exhibitions that showcased industrial might, like the Crystal Palace of 1851, Gothic revival displays featured fresh-carved green men, nature's ancient guardian, now framed behind glass for urban crowds to admire. This rediscovery wasn't perfect. The Victorians often missed the green man's primal power, turning him into a decorative curio. Yet without their obsessive cataloguing and reinvention, he might have faded entirely. When William Morris died in 1896, his coffin was draped with vine motifs, a final tribute to the green world he'd fought to remember. The industrial age had tried to bury the green man in coal dust, but like the seeds beneath pavement, he was waiting for the right moment to push through the cracks. By the 20th century, the green man had traded cathedral nooks for neon-lit pub signs, his ancient leafy visage reborn as a cheery welcome to ale drinkers across Britain. The transformation began in earnest between the two world wars, when publicans keen to attract working-class patrons with a dash of folksy charm began slapping his image on in signs. One of the most famous examples was the Old Green Man Inn in London's Euston, where a grinning, ivy-clad figure swung above the door, a far cry from the solemn stone carvings of medieval masons. But the real turning point came in 1959, when the British brewery Mitchells and Butlers launched their Green Man pub chain, plastering his face on hundreds of taverns nationwide. Suddenly, a symbol once whispered about in sacred spaces was mass-produced on beer mats and etched into frosted pint glasses, his mystery diluted by the clatter of cash registers. This commercial boom wasn't limited to pubs. The green man cropped up on biscuit tins, tea towels, and even railway posters, his face evoking a sanitized version of merry old England, a marketing tactic that played on post-war nostalgia for a simpler, more rural past. Yet there's irony in this reinvention. The same industrial capitalism that had nearly erased nature's sacred symbols was now repackaging one of its oldest guardians as a mascot for consumerism. His vines, once carved with reverence, now curled around slogans for ales like Green Man's Revenge or Old Leafy Brew, stripping away millennia of spiritual weight in favor of marketable whimsy. Not everyone embraced this commercialization. Folklorists like Catherine Briggs lamented the symbol's gentrification into kitsch, arguing that turning the Green Man into a pub logo severed his ties to the land's deeper rhythms. Meanwhile, corporate branding teams couldn't resist tweaking his image to fit modern tastes. Compare the Mitchells and Butlers version, a jolly, apple-cheeked figure resembling a tipsy farmer, to the eerie, disgorging heads of medieval churches. The former was designed to comfort, the latter to unsettle. Even the colors shifted. Sacred stone greens gave way to bright, unnatural hues that popped on advertisements. Yet commercialization wasn't purely a loss. Paradoxically, it kept the Green Man alive in the public imagination long enough for his spiritual revival in the latter half of the century. When eco-pagans and environmentalists began reclaiming him in the 1960s, they weren't resurrecting a forgotten relic, they were subverting a familiar brand. His face on a pub sign became a Trojan horse, sneaking ancient symbolism back into everyday life. The same mass-produced imagery that trivialized him also made him recognizable, a visual shorthand ripe for re-enchantment. The most fascinating twist, some pubs unwittingly preserved fragments of older traditions. The Green Man at Blindley Heath in Surrey kept a folly tree in its garden, where locals tied ribbons and coins, a folk custom eerily reminiscent of pre-Christian offerings to woodland spirits. In Ireland, the Man of the Trees pub in County Cork hosted annual storytelling nights featuring Green Man tales, blending commerce with cultural memory. Even the corporate chains couldn't fully erase the symbol's primal pull. Order a pint under his gaze, and you were still, in some small way, participating in a ritual far older than happy hour. By the century's end, the Green Man had achieved something few ancient symbols manage: ubiquity without erasure. He was both a stock image on a menu and a rallying cry for radical environmentalists, his commercial veneer thin enough to crack under pressure. When the Mitchells and Butlers chain rebranded in the 1990s, abandoning the Green Man for sleeker designs, his image didn't vanish, it migrated. Activists screen-printed his face on protest banners, authors wove him into fantasy novels, and tattoo artists inked him onto skin. The pub signs had made him common, but they couldn't make him trivial. Like ivy breaking through brick, the Green Man's roots ran too deep for commercialization to kill only disguise. When modern environmental activists march with banners bearing the Green Man's face, they're tapping into a visual language older than protest signs, older even than cathedrals. His resurgence as an eco-icon isn't just a clever rebranding. It's the latest chapter in a story that began when the first human looked at a sprouting seed and saw something sacred. Today's campaigners might not realize it, but when they wield his image against deforestation or climate inaction, they're echoing the same urgent plea carved into medieval stone: remember where life comes from. The irony is rich industrialization nearly erased the Green Man, yet now he's become one of its fiercest critics, his vines strangling pipelines on protest posters and his leaves shading endangered species lists. Consider the emblem of the UK's Friends of the Earth, where a stylized Green Man cradles the planet like a fragile fruit, or the radical Earth First movement, which adopted his disgorging visage for direct action pamphlets, the leaves spewing forth like a call to revolt. This isn't superficial symbolism. Environmental psychologists note that the Green Man's face triggers a deeper response than abstract logos. His mingling of human and plant traits mirrors our own biological interdependence with ecosystems. He bypasses the analytical brain, explains Dr. Leila Montenegro, who studies symbolic cognition. When people see a face in nature, even an artistic one, it activates ancient neural pathways tied to empathy. Suddenly, deforestation isn't just statistics, it's a living being under attack. Yet this modern adoption isn't merely pragmatic, it's poetic justice. The same forces that drove the green man into the shadows, industrial agriculture, urban sprawl, the severing of human-nature bonds, are precisely what today's activists combat. In Devon, protesters dressed as green men blockaded bulldozers chopping down ancient woodlands, their costumes eerily reminiscent of the Jack in the Green May Day dancers who once blessed those same trees. At Standing Rock, water protectors painted foliate faces on their banners, drawing a line from medieval well guardians to their fight against oil pipelines. The symbol's adaptability shines here. Where churches once sanitized him, activists radicalize him, turning decorative carvings back into battle cries. What's fascinating is how closely these modern interpretations mirror his oldest roles. Pre-Christian farmers left offerings at sacred groves to ensure good harvests. Today, community gardens plant his image as a pledge to grow food sustainably. Medieval masons carved him near baptismal fonts to honor water's life-giving role. River cleanup crews now wear his likeness on T-shirts while hauling trash from polluted streams. Even the darker aspects resurface. Just as Gothic carving showed vines erupting from mouths like warnings, contemporary artists depict him with plastic choking his foliage, a silent scream against pollution. The green man has come full circle, no longer begging nature's mercy but demanding ours. This revival isn't without tension. Some neo-pagans argue activist groups dilute his spiritual significance, reducing a deity to a logo. Others counter that environmentalism is the religion now, with climate strikes as its rituals and Greta Thunberg as its prophet. The truth likely lies in between. When Extinction Rebellion projected his face onto London's Parliament, they weren't worshipping him, they were weaponizing millennia of collective memory. His power lies precisely in this duality. A symbol flexible enough to adorn a pub sign one day and a protest march the next, yet always whispering the same truth, that humanity's survival is tangled irrevocably with the fate of the green world. One glance at his leafy glare and you know this isn't just a logo, it's a reckoning. Today's artists aren't just carving the green man into stone, they're reimagining him in materials as unexpected as recycled plastics, neon lights, and even augmented reality. Take the controversial 2010 Manchester Green Man, a towering sculpture woven entirely from discarded electronics and car parts. From a distance, his face emerges like a medieval carving, but up close, he's a chaos of circuit boards and rusted steel, an unflinching commentary on consumer waste and nature's resilience. The artist Jason Wilshire Mills deliberately placed him near a shopping district, forcing bustling crowds to confront the uneasy marriage of ancient symbolism and modern excess. Critics called it jarring, admirers praised its brutal honesty. That tension is precisely the point. The green man has always been a mirror, and contemporary art holds up a stark reflection. What does it mean to invoke nature's guardian in an age of climate crisis? Digital artists are pushing the motif even further. London's Tate Modern recently featured an interactive installation where visitors donned augmented reality headsets to watch a digital green man sprout from the gallery's concrete floor, his vines creeping across walls in real time. Each tendril carried lines of poetry about extinction, grafting medieval imagery onto urgent ecological warnings. Meanwhile, Japanese artist Makoto Azuma suspends living plants in eerie, humanoid shapes, their roots exposed like veins, a haunting echo of the disgorging green men in Gothic cathedrals, but with a twist. His works wilt and regrow during exhibitions, embodying the cycle of decay and renewal central to the symbol's origins. Not all reinterpretations are summer. Australian sculptor Deborah Halpern's mosaiced green man grins wildly in Melbourne's Burrarung Ma Park, his kaleidoscopic tiles inviting selfies rather than solemn contemplation. By day, children clamber over his colorful tendrils. By night, solar-powered LEDs make his foliage pulse with an otherworldly glow. Here, the Green Man isn't a relic but a living participant in urban joy, a reminder that environmental reverence needn't be devoid of play. Yet some installations court outright rebellion. In Berlin, anarchist collective The Greenhouse Project tagged abandoned buildings with wheat-paste murals of the Green Man, his leaves morphing into barbed wire or riot shields. Their manifesto declares him the patron saint of guerrilla rewilding, a rallying symbol for activists who seed bombs in vacant lots or chain themselves to bulldozers. Street artists from Sao Paulo to Seoul have followed suit, splashing his face on overpasses and demolition sites, a silent challenge to concrete sprawl. The most provocative works confront colonialism's legacy. Kenyan artist Wangechi Mutu's Green Lady series fuses the foliate head with African masks, her aluminum and botanical collages critiquing how Western environmentalism often erases indigenous stewardship. In Vancouver, Musqueam artist Susan Point's cedar carvings re-envision the Green Man through Coast Salish motifs, his vines becoming salmon streams and herringbone patterns. These pieces ask uncomfortable questions: who gets to claim nature's symbols and whose traditions are sidelined in the process? Even traditionalists are reinventing the form. Master stonecarver Simon Verity, who restored foliate heads at New York's Cathedral of St. John the Divine, now teaches apprentices to blend medieval techniques with modern themes. His latest commission, a Green Man for a California winery, sprouts grapevines instead of oak, his mouth parted in song rather than spewing leaves. The ancients weren't stuck in the past, Verity insists. They made the Green Man speak to their time. Our job is to do the same. From recycled scrap to virtual reality, these artists prove the Green Man's power lies in his adaptability. He's no longer confined to churches or folklore. He's a shapeshifter for the Anthropocene, his leaves rustling with warnings, dreams, and defiant hope. Whether pixelated or carved in cedar, his face still demands the same question. Can we heed nature's voice before it's drowned out completely? Was there ever a single, unified Green Man mythology, or have we been stitching together fragments of different traditions across time? The truth is frustratingly elusive. Unlike deities with clear pantheons and scriptures, the Green Man leaves no sacred texts or central temples, just a trail of stone faces whispering contradictory clues. Some scholars, like historian Dr. Philip Bernhardt, argue that the symbol's ubiquity suggests a shared Indo-European root, pointing to parallels like India's vine, choked kurtamucka, or the Celtic Cernunnos as branches of the same primal archetype. Others, like folklorist Dr. Elena Parker, counter that these are independent creations, humanity's universal habit of seeing faces in leaves, not proof of a lost religion. The debate hinges on a single haunting question: are we looking at the echoes of a forgotten cult, or simply the artistic expression of agrarian awe? The uneven distribution of green men in churches deepens the puzzle. Why does Exeter Cathedral boast over 100 foliate heads while Westminster Abbey has none? Architectural historian Dr. Richard Heyman proposes a practical answer: regional workshop traditions. Stonemasons trained in certain areas, like the prolific Herefordshire School, may have favored the motif, spreading it locally like a stylistic meme. But Dr. Sarah J. Biggs offers a darker theory. Her survey of East Anglian churches reveals green men clustered near former pagan sites, suggesting they were deliberate spiritual lightning rods, absorbing lingering nature worship into Christian spaces. Meanwhile, in Cistercian monasteries, their near absence aligns with the order's austere aesthetics, proving even medieval art had its trends. The symbol's explosive medieval popularity is perhaps the most baffling twist. After centuries of sporadic appearances, why did the 12th to 14th centuries become the green man's heyday? Dr. William Anderson ties it to the Little Ice Age, a climatic crisis that made harvests unpredictable and death omnipresent. In this context, the Green Man's cyclical imagery offered comfort, a promise that winter wouldn't last forever. But art historian Dr. Pamela Berger points to the Crusades, arguing that returning knights brought back Near Eastern foliage motifs, blending them with local traditions. The timeline fits Chartres Cathedral's green men multiply after the Templars' heyday, but was this cultural cross-pollination or something deeper? Compounding the mystery are the green men who defy categorization. In Italy's Lucca Cathedral, a 14th-century capital shows a leafy face with bees swarming from its mouth, an image found nowhere else. Is this a lost local legend or a mason's private symbolism? Even more perplexing are the green beasts of northern France, hybrid creatures with leonine bodies and foliate manes, their meaning lost to time. The sheer variety suggests we're dealing not with one green man but many, a hydra of interpretations sprouting from each culture's soil. Modern researchers are turning to cutting-edge tools for answers. LiDAR scans of forgotten church vaults reveal previously hidden carvings, while spectral imaging on manuscripts uncovers erased foliate marginalia. Yet every discovery seems to raise new questions. Perhaps the green man's greatest trick is this: the more we chase his meaning, the more he dissolves into the leaves, reminding us that some mysteries grow deeper when exposed to light. From the shadowy corners of medieval churches to the neon glow of modern art installations, the green man has never truly faded because he speaks to something eternal in the human spirit. His leafy face is more than a relic, it's a mirror held up to our deepest fears and hopes about the natural world. Whether carved by a 12th-century mason or pixels by a digital artist, he asks the same haunting question: are we part of nature's tapestry or have we torn ourselves free? His persistence across centuries isn't just a quirk of history, it's proof that no matter how far we stray into steel and screens, we still ache for the whisper of leaves and the smell of damp earth. What's remarkable isn't just how long he's endured, but how he's evolved. Pagans saw him as a god, Christians as a parable, Victorians as decoration, and activists as a rebel. Yet through every reinvention, his core remains unchanged, a bridge between the wild and the human, a reminder that every breath we take is borrowed from the green world. Even now, in an era of climate crisis, his vines seem to tighten around our collective conscience. When protesters paint his face on banners or artists sculpt him from recycled trash, they're continuing a conversation that began millennia ago. One where nature isn't just scenery, but a living, breathing participant in our story. So here's your invitation: become part of that story. Next time you pass an old church, a library, even a pub, look closer. The green man loves hiding in plain sight, peering from rain spouts, lurking in ceiling bosses, grinning from stained glass. Snap a photo, share it in the comments, and tell us where you found him. Every time someone spots his leafy gaze, the ancient pact between humanity and nature renews itself. Because the truth is, the green man was never just a symbol. He's a challenge to remember, to respect, and perhaps just in time to change.